Have you ever wondered or read a book, a devotion even, fiction, nonfiction book, and wondered where does the writer get their ideas? Well, welcome to Reality Coaching for Writers. I'm Diana Flegal, and my normal co-host, Eddie, is surfing off the coast right now, right down the road from me today. So I have the privilege of welcoming Cindy K. Sproles to our show today. Cindy, welcome.
Hi, Diana.
It's so good to have you here. I don't know if your ears burn periodically on Tuesdays, it's because Eddie and I are talking about you. But
I'm not sure if that's a good thing or not.
Always good, always good. And I just want to say, Eddie and I both had the privilege of watching Cindy along her writer's journey, and it's been so much fun. And we've even had listeners, Cindy, request your presence here. So I'm so glad we finally arranged it today. I'm just sorry Eddie isn't here to, sharing the fun.
Well, that's all right. We all know surfing is much more important.
Well, I know it's been killing him that he hasn't been in the water as much as he'd like to be. So, so Cindy, for those of you that aren't familiar with her, is a multi-published, award-winning author. She's published in both nonfiction and fiction titles. And so, Cindy, my first question for you on where did you get the idea is actually for one of your nonfiction titles called New Sheets.
New Sheets.
What?
So I came up with New Sheets after I went through a divorce. not any time that not a way you want to have to come up with a title. I'm always better at coming up with a title first, and then eventually I figure out what to go along with it. But when I went through my divorce, I kept thinking for months I couldn't sleep, and I couldn't figure out why I still couldn't sleep. Everything was over with. Why was I waking up in the middle of the night? Why could I not sleep? And then I realized when I rolled over and pulled my pillow up against my face that I could still smell Polo cologne.
Ooh.
Which means no matter how much you wash your sheets, you cannot get the scent of cologne out of them.
Wow.
And so I decided at that point, if I was going to be able to move forward, I needed to be able to get rid of those sheets. So I started literally saving my pennies, nickels, quarters in a jar. And let me tell you, Walmart's got some pretty ugly sheets in the sale bin. But I bought a set of new sheets for $5 at Walmart.
Wow.
And so I came home, took off the old sheets. I wadded them up and threw them away. And the new sheets I put on, and I didn't even wash them because, it was just this nice, crisp. I know they're a little stiff, but when you put them on the bed, there's no wrinkles. It was just this nice, crisp, good feeling. And so I don't know, the boys jumped up on the bed with me, and I decided at that point, I think we're going to start a new family tradition, just the three of us. And when we pass through, any kind of season of life that warrants it, be it good or bad, we're going to buy new sheets and we're going to throw away the old ones. And so that's what we did. When the boys were growing up, when we celebrated, good thing. Now, I wasn't buying sheets every week, okay?
Right. You're talking about milestones, right?
Yeah, milestones. Yeah. Seasons when we went through them. But we would buy new sheets. The funny thing was when the boys all graduated and moved away from home, when the last one moved out, Tim said, well, are we buying new sheets? And I went, no, sir, we're buying a bedspread. So we bought a new bedspread. But that's where new sheets came from, because it was, and I divided the book into seasons of life according to sheets. So, in the first season of our life, we have muslin that's a little rough, and then we hit percale where, no, no ironing, just throw them in the dryer. And then I'm in the season of life right now where we have Egyptian cotton.
Oh, yeah.
So I divided them up like that so that the devotions fell into the seasons and to varieties of sheets. So it was fun, but yeah, that's how I came up with that title.
Well, Cindy, what's been the response of your readers? I mean, I think so often we need to give ourselves permission to celebrate certain passages of our life. So what's been the response of your readers? Can you share some of that with us?
Well, we did news sheets with Christian devotions when Eddie and I started Lighthouse Publishing. Before we let it become Lighthouse, we started as Christian devotions. And so
Mhm.
Eddie said, we've got to learn how to do a book, because we were learning. And so news sheets was the book we learned on. But it surprised us both because it sold quite a lot. I mean, it sold 2,000 or 3,000 copies, which was pretty awesome.
Yeah,
For a first time little not a novel, but for a first time little
right.
devotion. And it was just 30 days. So yeah, it was received very well, and people liked it. They related to the fact of the seasons of life, and they liked the idea of a new family tradition. So it was received well. People enjoyed it. And
Well,
all of the devotions are not about me. I mean, they're just, kind of random scripture devotions that some of them are about my family, but not all. There's one in there about Tolkien. There's a bunch of different types of devotions in there. So
what was that one about? You just said?
the one on Tolkien,
Oh, on Tolkien. Okay.
yeah.
It's so funny because my air conditioner just kicked on,
Oh,
and I thought you said polka, polka,
oh,
because
okay.
we just had our Oktoberfest this past weekend, and for those of you that don't know, I've been wearing crutches, and so I just had to stand by and listen while the polka music went on. But it was so much fun watching the kids and the older generation and the young people polking. But okay, back to Cindy and her idea. um, I love that, Cindy, and I think you touched on something that Eddie and I are always coaching writers about, is to have relatability in the things that you write, your devotions and your nonfiction titles, because readers are selfish. When we
Well,
read,
rightfully so. They're paying money for what we write. So
yeah, we
yeah.
want it to resonate with us, and I think that's one of the wonderful things that we all love about you, Cindy, is you are transparent and so relatable because you don't you take life and you share it. You're a born storyteller. So my next question is, who in the family, in your family history, was also the storyteller? Was there
Well,
any?
I would say probably my grandmother.
Okay.
She was always so much fun, and a lot of things to do. And I can't say that I actually remember that she sat down and told us stories, but she was always relating her life and adventures and things. She was always doing that, and so I suppose probably from her, and I learned to listen and to make the best out of stories. I think the other thing that has made me a storyteller is, my brother is 12 years older than me.
Mm.
And so basically, my brother was getting married when I was in second grade.
Oh, wow.
And I never remember being without my sister-in-law. She's really not my sister-in-law. She's my sister. I don't ever have a time that I don't remember her being a part of my life. And so I think for me, probably the biggest part for me was I spent a lot of time as a kid by myself,
Mm.
because we had a couple of neighbors, but they were in an abusive situation. I didn't know that, but my mother knew that. And so they weren't always allowed to play, outside. We lived up on the side of a hill. So there wasn't, you didn't just jump out the door and go next door and play. but I spent a lot of time in our woods beside of our house, and and I had my made up friend Cindy K. Hink. My brother still teases me about that. But I became my own storyteller in order to, I think, entertain myself. And
Okay.
I think between that and the stories my grandmother told us as kids growing up and being a part of her life, actually getting to be a part of the things that she did, her antics, kind of all wove together to make me be able to tell stories.
That's wonderful. I I do, I thought about this, but I'm going to ask, is there any way you could share your rototiller story with us? It's one of my favorite stories. And this is about your grandmother, right?
And this is true. See, this is how my grandmother told stories. It was with truth. It was not like she came back later and told us the story. We actually experienced the story with her. So, yes, I'll tell you the story about my grandmother. Okay, so the first thing you need to know is my grandmother never wore slacks. She always wore those little dresses, the little dust dresses that buttoned up the front and had little pockets on the front of them.
Uh-huh.
No matter, that's what she wore all the time. I never remember my grandmother ever wearing a pair of slacks. But she was in her mid 80s, I guess. And so at her house, she had her garden below. You could look out her kitchen window at her garden. And my uncle had already plowed it and tilled it up. So, when they first plow a garden to turn it under, spread all big clots of dirt where it's not, been tilled down yet. And so my dad told my grandmother, and her name was Lokeel, by the way.
Okay.
Good mountain name.
Good.
He said, Lokeel, I get off work at 3:00. And if you will just wait till I get home, me and Cindy will come out there and we'll till that garden down for you. And she said, well, all right, all right. Well, she was independent woman that, and 3:00 was too late in the day for her. And so Dad and I did what we said we would do as soon as Dad got off work, and he picked me up and we went straight out to my grandmother's house. Well, she never locked her door. So we walked in the house and it's like, low kill. Grandma, where you at? And then, no, she wasn't in the house. So we walked up to the kitchen sink and looked out the window, and lo and behold, she was out there with that rototiller in the back in the garden tilling. Well, when you get right up to the edge of the or the edge of the garden, the clots are really big because that's where the rototiller throws it up against there. So my dad was standing there, and all of a sudden we see my grandmother, doing this as she was going down through there because the clots were big, and she hit one of those big clots of dirt. And when she hit it, the rototiller stopped dead. And when it stopped dead, it flung her over the front of the rototiller, and she landed on her back. And the first thing she did was hop up and look around to see if anybody saw what happened. Well, my dad scared my dad to death. Well, didn't do a whole lot for me, but we went tearing out of the house and running around, where she was. And my dad said, "Okay, I told you if you just wait till I got here, I'd do this." And she said, "I'm perfectly capable." And Dad said, "I just saw you flip over the front of that thing." She looked at my dad just as innocent as she could look at him and said, "Kirk Frady, if I didn't know better, I'd swear you were lying." She never admitted, even with us both seeing that, she never admitted that she flew over the front of that rototiller ever. And my dad got in the car. We finished rototilling and we got in the car, and he said, "You know what makes me so mad about her?" And I said, "No, what?" He said, "She can look at me and lie like that, and I can believe her." So that was my grandmother, so we experienced life with my grandmother. It wasn't just stories she made up. We experienced life with her.
Well, and Lokeel is a name that you gave one of your characters in one of your stories.
Yeah, Lars Winter. My character, Lokeel.
So
Yeah,
let's
it's a
start.
good mountain name.
It is. I had never heard it.
Yeah.
And a lot of the things in your novel, Cindy, you know, this Yankee never had knowledge of. And so I remember when I was first reading your manuscript, Mercy's Reign, that I picked up the phone and I called you and I said, Cindy, okay, girl, is there something you're not telling me? Like, where did you get this idea for this preacher man? And you said, Diana, honest, I had a wonderful childhood that is not from my personal life. So share with your readers how you decided to write what many people call dark stories. Edgy stories is another way to put it. And where you came up with that preacher in that first book of yours.
Well, I mean, the first thing is I love the Appalachian culture. I love my heritage here. But the truth of the matter is, when you're up in the deep part of the mountains, it is not an easy life, and it's a life that people choose. These days, it's a life people choose. Back then, it wasn't necessarily what they wanted, but all they had, all they could afford. And so for me, I want people to know the culture of the Appalachian Mountains. Everything is not bad. There's always a lesson in everything that happens here. And the thing for me is to be able to say, well, this is the hardship that happened. I want people to see the culture of the mountains and to see, that life is just not entitled here.
Right.
And so the people really had to, they really had to face some hard things to get through them, but they always look for what the good in the ordeal was. And so with Mercy's Reign, I was, my husband worked graveyard at the time, and he was on graveyard, and I was in bed. I woke up, I don't know, it was after midnight. I couldn't go back to sleep. So I flipped on the television. Well, if you're in Upper East Tennessee, Southwest Virginia, Lower Kentucky, after midnight, what you're going to get on TV are those hellfire and damnation preachers that have the little handlebar mustaches and little cowboy hats. So don't anybody be offended. That's what you find on television. That's when those guys come on. And I don't know, this little guy, he kind of reminded me of Yosemite Sam, from Bugs Bunny. But I thought, I listened to him for a few minutes and hitting his hand, thumping his Bible, and preaching away. And I thought, this guy would make a great bad guy. I don't know why. I don't know what it was about him, but there was just something about him that made me think he would make a great bad guy. And so I flipped the channel. At that point, I turned the channel. And I was flipping through. I still to this day do not know the name of the documentary. I landed on Discovery Channel because it was after midnight. I don't know what. I came in on the middle of the documentary, so I never saw the title of it.
Mm-hmm.
But it was a documentary on child abuse under the age of 7. Mm-hmm. And it was one of those documentaries where you didn't want to watch it, but you couldn't not watch it. You sit there. I sat there with my pillow, up over my face because it's like, I don't want to watch this, but I needed to watch it. And I was just, it still makes me cry to think that at the horrible things that people can come up with to do to little children that have no way to, defend themselves. Yeah. And it haunted me for days. And I thought, no, I have the perfect storm here. This is the perfect storm. And so that's where the story for Mercy's Reign came about. I wanted to address some issues because at the time that book came out in 2017. And so I was writing it in 2015-ish. And there were some things on television about some of the big preachers having affairs and, in the Catholic Church, some of the priests abusing children. I mean, that stuff was on the news right then.
Right. Correct.
And so I thought, this is kind of the perfect storm. This needs to be addressed. the church needs to be addressed, and those little babies need a voice.
Mm.
And so Mercy's Reign was born out of that. And it started out with the title of being, the title was Where the River Begins. Do you remember that? Mm-hmm. Where the River Begins. Mm-hmm. And actually the publisher was not going to change, lucky me, the publisher was not going to change the title. As we got into editing the book and looking at it, the more I felt like this is just not the right title for this book. It's a good title, but it's really not the right title. And so I worked with the editors at Flegal and said, what do you think? And so they put their heads together and came up with Mercy's Reign. And it actually was, we named the character's name was Mercy.
Right.
And so it really, it was better because everything that could rain down on that girl rained down, you know. So it was the perfect title. But it was an opportunity to the church to address an issue that needed to be addressed, you know, and it was an opportunity for people who were non-believers, because I did not write that book to the church. You remember, I wrote that book before other people were writing to the general market. That was where I was writing for.
Exactly.
So I was writing that to the general market because I wanted people in the general market to see that there's redemption available. That Christians don't have perfect lives, and you know, everything don't get tied up in a bow. Right. And we have crap happen to us, and sometimes it's stuff that we can't fix or change. Mm-hmm. But it doesn't mean that the mercy of the Lord is not there, but it's something that we have to reach toward. So I had the opportunity to minister two ways. I think both of us were surprised when, because it hung out there with one publisher for a long time. We thought it was going to go general market. Right. And then we were surprised when the very last publisher on the Christian end came back and said, no. Remember, they said no.
They did.
And then 2 weeks later, they came back and said, we thought about this. And, you know, that just doesn't happen. And so I believe Mercy's Reign it truly was a work of God, because things happened with that book that should not have happened.
Yeah.
But yeah, that's where it came. So it gave me an opportunity to address that, you know, the child abuse thing, and also to address an issue that's within the church. So the pastor was the bad guy, and he was a really bad guy, you know.
Yeah, and you know, Cindy, I think that's the power of story. Is you can tackle tough issues, mm-hmm. and when you weave them in story, it makes us face them. Like you said, that documentary, you didn't want to watch it, but you knew you needed to. And I think too often, if we stay in our little bubbles, we can successfully ignore issues that God wants us to speak into and participate in. And I know you also personally work with is it Hope House? Hope House?
Oh, well, I don't work with them. We have a lady in our church. I support them. We have a lady in our church who at the time was with Hope House, who the Hope House here in Kingsport actually works with moms to help unwed moms, to help them make the decision to not abort their baby. And so, you know, when I did news sheets, the proceeds to news sheets all went to Hope House. And, but yeah, I mean, there was that there to see that those, you know, situations there with some of those women who, you know, were abusive situations, you know, that they were able to come out of, thanks to Hope House helping them along.
Yes,
you know?
wonderful.
So,
wonderful.
And their babies were saved, you know, and that was the good thing. Their babies were saved, and they weren't aborted, you know. So yeah, it was a good opportunity to address a lot of that stuff. The thing I was not prepared for was the response that I got from the book. I was prepared for the church to hate me. And actually, it turned out the opposite. I had ministers sending me notes saying, thank you for this opportunity. Now I can broach this subject.
Yes.
And so it's like, really? Seriously? You know, so I think God just used that book. It was meant to be. And and God just used that book
Yeah,
in
and
ways.
it opened doors for more stories within Christian publishing. And
It was kind of the relaunch of
yeah,
that Appalachian historical, and Crickle went out on a limb.
they did.
And
Yay, pretty
yeah,
cool.
now lots of people are writing Appalachian historical, which yay, that makes me happy.
I know, it does, it does. So you had Mercy's Reign, then followed with Liar's Winter, and then All Mama's Children, which was birthed right as the pandemic hit. And
And the title of that one got changed. That one did get changed to What Mama Left Behind.
what Mama
But
left
it was okay.
behind,
But
right?
yeah, it launched in June of 2020. And so yeah.
So that one has,
Pandemic, the killer of more things than just what we thought it would be. And
right,
took its
right.
toll on all kinds of stuff. So
Well,
yeah.
and it's interesting that that story is about a pandemic. I mean,
It is.
it coincided when you were just writing a story, and then it gets launched during a pandemic. But I still feel that story hasn't found its legs yet.
Yeah.
Quite like I believe it will. I believe it will. Yes. So
Yeah, it is starting to grow legs a little bit, but yeah, the pandemic did it no favors, and not just my book, but anybody that released a book during that time, it really took a toll on it. I mean, basically, I think publishers looked at 2020 and said, well, we didn't have any books published that year, because it's like there was nothing,
you couldn't market
so
them in any normal way. You couldn't have book launches and signings and show up in person, and yeah, so
yeah.
it really,
And
then
see, we had already done all the pre-legwork on that. We'd already done, I don't know, 50 interviews and, magazine articles. All that stuff had already been done. And then boom, it just is hit. And so all the work you'd done up to that point just kind of hit rock bottom on it.
right.
But yeah, I mean, I think it was funny that Mercy's Reign was, came out at a time when the world was in the situation that Mercy was in. Then Liar's Winter came out and bullying was on the news again.
Right.
And the thing was, I wasn't, I mean, I was writing this book before bullying hit the news, and then the pandemic, who would have thought, that I was going to be writing a book about the influenza, swimming through the mountains and killing people, when then we have, the year that it releases a story about a pandemic.
Right.
So, I think in a way God has blessed me to be able to give a heads up on some stuff like that. Not that I have vision to see what's coming, but I think to help people work their way through those things.
I think that's so good and so true, Cindy. So true. Now we're running out of time already. I knew this would go too fast. We might have to have you back to talk about character development and some other things later, but tell us now what's coming up. You have a book about to release, right?
I have three, actually. Three. I have one devotional that comes out through Orange Stream Media in February, which is called Meet Me Where I Am, Lord. And that is putting us back into the scripture. It's not a fancy book. It's putting us back into the scripture so that we remember why we believe what we believe. And then in June seems to be my novel time. Yeah. I have a novel coming out with Ravel in June that says This Is Where It Ends, and it's about a 94-year-old elderly woman in the mountains. So, and then hopefully Christmas of next year, of 2023, then Kriegel is taken on Coal Black Lies, and so that book will be coming out, and it could have a title change by the time it gets around there. So there'll be three in the next little bit, which is nice, rather than having to wait 2 years in between.
Will be happy, yes, because the readers are always, Cindy, when, right? It's the next book. Well, so in these final moments, what would be a piece of advice you would give a nonfiction and a fiction writer, what would be, if boil your journey down, what would you say in these final moments to a
I
writer?
would say, think of Rick Warren's first line in Purpose Driven Life, which is, it's not about you. And I think that if we write our stories not about us or what we feel like we need to do, but what God leads us to do, then good things come from that. You know, He works through it. So I think that that would be what I would say. You know, don't try to make it fit you, you know, and what you think needs to be done, whether it be self-publishing or trying to traditionally publish or whatever. But, you know, step aside and ask God, where are you in this? Not what is your will for me, but where are you in this? And so I can walk along beside you. And when we walk along beside Him, He does wonderful things with what we can do. So I would say it's not about you. It's
Good.
about walking alongside God and letting Him do what He wants to do with what He gives you.
Oh, that's such good advice. Good advice for writers all along the journey. Thank you, Cindy, so much for being with us today. It's been so fun, and we'll have you